The story of Jane Eyre. Jane's childhood at Gateshead. The novel begins with Jane Eyre, a young orphan, living with her cruel aunt, Mrs. Reed, and her cousins at Gateshead. Jane is mistreated and unloved. One day, after a particularly harsh punishment, she is sent to Lowood Institution, a charity school for girls. Life at Lowood. At Lowood, Jane endures harsh conditions, strict discipline, and poor treatment, particularly from Mr. Brocklehurst, the headmaster. However, she also befriends Helen Burns, a kind and devout girl who teaches Jane about forgiveness and endurance. Helen dies of consumption, leaving a lasting impact on Jane. Over time, the school improves, and Jane excels in her studies, eventually becoming a teacher there. Thornfield Hall and Mr. Rochester. Yearning for new experiences, Jane advertises her services as a governess and is hired by Mrs. Fairfax, the housekeeper at Thornfield Hall, to teach Adele, the ward of the enigmatic master, Mr. Rochester. Jane initially finds Thornfield mysterious, but she grows comfortable in her role. Jane first meets Rochester under dramatic circumstances. She helps him after he falls from his horse. Over time, the two develop a close bond through candid conversations. Jane, despite her modesty, falls in love with Rochester, unaware of the feelings he harbors for her. The proposal. Rochester tricks Jane into believing he plans to marry Blanche Ingram, a beautiful but shallow socialite. However, he surprises Jane by confessing his love and proposing to her. Despite her initial disbelief, Jane accepts, overjoyed at the prospect of their union. The wedding and the secret. On the day of their wedding, a shocking revelation stops the ceremony. Mr. Mason, a guest, announces that Rochester is already married to his sister, Bertha Mason. Jane learns that Bertha is mentally ill and has been hidden in the attic of Thornfield under the care of a servant, Grace Poole. Heartbroken and betrayed, Jane refuses to stay and be Rochester's mistress, despite his pleas. She flees Thornfield, leaving behind the man she loves. Jane's journey and independence. Wandering alone and penniless, Jane is taken in by the Rivers siblings, St. John, Diana, and Mary. Jane finds work as a village schoolteacher and becomes close to her newfound family. Later, she learns she has inherited a fortune from her uncle and shares the wealth with the Rivers siblings, who turn out to be her cousins. St. John, a devout but cold clergyman, proposes marriage to Jane, urging her to join him as a missionary. Jane, realizing she does not love him, declines, even as he pressures her to accept. Return to Thornfield. Hearing Rochester's voice calling her name in a mystical experience, Jane decides to return to Thornfield. She finds the estate in ruins, destroyed by a fire started by Bertha Mason. During the blaze, Rochester tried to save his wife but lost his sight and one hand in the process. Bertha died in the fire. Reunion and marriage. Jane reunites with Rochester at his secluded home, Ferndean. Though he is physically diminished, their love is as strong as ever. Jane reassures Rochester of her enduring love, and they marry, building a life of equality in deep affection. Happily ever after. Over time, Rochester regains partial sight, allowing him to see their first child. Jane's narrative concludes with a sense of fulfillment, emphasizing her spiritual and emotional growth, as well as the triumph of love and integrity over adversity. This story is a profound exploration of themes like love, independence, morality, and social class, with Jane Eyre standing as one of literature's most beloved heroines.